Imagine a nation robbed of its gold, its people, its very soul, centuries of violence, enslavement, and cultural erasure that built empires while leaving scars that bleed into today. This is Colombia's story under Spain's colonial grip, a saga of exploitation that's never been answered with justice, never met with a single cent of reparation. But what if I told you that other nations have won atonement for their pasts? That Germany still pays billions annually to Holocaust survivors in Israel, turning moral debt into tangible hope?
Welcome to a journey that will shake your view of history and justice. An eye-opening dive into Colombia's unhealed wounds, the global fight for reparations, and a bold blueprint for holding empires accountable. Buckle up, because this isn't just a story of the past, it's a call to reshape the future. Hit that subscribe button, and let's uncover the truth together.
Echoes of empire, colonial injustices, the imperative of reparations, and pathways for Colombia's redress from Spain. The legacies of colonialism remain etched into the socio-economic, cultural, and political landscapes of nations across the global south, manifesting as persistent inequalities, cultural erasure, and economic disparities that trace their origins to centuries of exploitation. In the case of Colombia, Spain's colonial dominion from the late 15th century through the early 19th century inflicted profound wrongs. The violent conquest of indigenous peoples, the extraction of vast mineral wealth, the transatlantic enslavement of Africans, and the systematic dismantling of indigenous knowledge systems. Yet, despite these atrocities, Colombia has received no formal compensation from Spain, no reparations, no structured restitution, and no acknowledgement framed as atonement. This absence is not unique, but emblematic of a broader reticence among former colonial powers to confront their historical responsibilities. This essay undertakes an extensive analytical examination of the Colombian-Spanish reparations lacuna, drawing on historical context, comparative international precedents, and the paradigmatic case of Israel's Holocaust reparations from Germany. By dissecting the mechanisms, motivations, and magnitudes of these payments, particularly Germany's ongoing annual commitments to Israel, we illuminate how reparations can serve as both moral reckoning and material redress. The analysis reveals structural barriers to colonial reparations, including legal anachronism, political nationalism, and economic interdependence, while highlighting opportunities for advocacy. Finally, tailored recommendations for Colombia outline pragmatic strategies to pursue compensation, emphasizing multilateral diplomacy, domestic mobilization, and innovative legal avenues. In an era of global reckoning with historical injustices, as evidenced by movements like Caracon's reparations push, Colombia's pursuit of redress from Spain could catalyze broader accountability for Europe's imperial past.
Historical wrongs, Spain's colonial legacy in Colombia. Spain's colonization of the territory that would become Colombia commenced with Alonso de Ojeda's 1499 expedition, marking the inception of a brutal era that endured until independence in 1819. The Viceroyalty of New Granada, established in 1717 with Bogotá as its capital, epitomized the extractive and coercive nature of Spanish imperialism. Indigenous populations, including the Muisca Confederation and Tairona chiefdoms, suffered catastrophic demographic collapse. Estimates suggest a pre-conquest population of up to 2 million dwindled to fewer than 200,000 by the 17th century due to warfare, forced labor under the encomienda and mita systems, and introduced diseases. The conquest was not merely violent but genocidal in intent and effect, as chronicled by Spanish chroniclers like Bartolomé de las Casas, who decried the destruction of the Indies. Economic exploitation formed the backbone of this regime. Colombia's gold mines, such as those in Antioquia and Chauco, and emerald deposits in Muso, generated immense wealth for the Spanish crown, equivalent to trillions in contemporary value when adjusted for inflation and opportunity costs. Annual exports of gold and silver from New Granada alone exceeded 2 million pesos by the late 18th century, funding Spain's European conflicts and opulent court while enforcing a mercantilist monopoly that crippled local economies. This plunder entrenched a plantation economy reliant on coerced indigenous and African labor, with over 100,000 Africans trafficked to Colombian shores between the 16th and 19th centuries, contributing to a legacy of racial hierarchies that persist in modern socioeconomic disparities. Cultural and social devastation compounded these material harms. Forced Christianization via the Inquisition eradicated indigenous cosmologies, languages, and artifacts. The Muiscas' sacred zaplema, golden tenjos, were melted into bullion, symbolizing the commodification of spirituality. A caste system, peninsulars, criollos, mestizos, indigenous, and enslaved Africans, fostered enduring divisions, with Afro-Colombians and indigenous groups disproportionately marginalized today. Indigenous communities control less than 5% of land, despite comprising 4.4% of the population, and Afro-Colombians face poverty rates twice the national average.
Post-independence, the 1881 treaty normalizing relations with Spain omitted any reparations clause, prioritizing diplomatic recognition over historical justice. Subsequent interactions, such as Spain's 100 to 200 million euros in annual development aid via the Agencia Española de Cooperación Internacional para el Desarrollo (ESID), are framed as mutual partnership rather than redress. Isolated gestures like the 2024 request for repatriation of the Quimbaya treasure, pre-Columbian artifacts gifted to Spain in 1893, have been rebuffed, underscoring Spain's invocation of cultural heritage laws to retain colonial spoils. This pattern reflects a deliberate amnesia, where Spain promotes a sanitized, Hispano-American narrative of shared heritage, eliding the asymmetries of power and plunder. Analytically, these wrongs constitute not isolated crimes, but a continuum of structural violence. International law, via instruments like the UN Basic Principles on Reparation for Victims, 2005, recognizes ongoing harms from historical injustices when their effects endure, such as intergenerational poverty and cultural loss. Yet, Spain's rejection of demands, mirroring its 2019 rebuff to Mexico's apology request, stems from a Black legend defense, portraying colonial critiques as anti-Spanish propaganda and pragmatic fears of precedent, setting claims from across Latin America. The result is a moral and material debt unpaid, perpetuating neocolonial dynamics in trade, 5.5 billion euros annually, and migration.
Comparative perspectives, reparations and global historical injustices. While Colombia's case exemplifies colonial impunity, a survey of international precedents reveals that reparations, though rare for colonial contexts, are feasible when political will aligns with moral imperatives. Fewer than 25% of formerly colonized nations have pursued official government-to-government redress, often due to domestic priorities like nation-building or economic dependencies on former metropoles. Successful cases typically involve targeted acknowledgments rather than blanket atonement, blending financial compensation with symbolic gestures. Notable examples include United Kingdom to Kenya, 2013. Following a landmark UK High Court ruling, Britain settled with 5,000 Mau Mau uprising survivors for £19.9 million, approximately $25 million, plus a £5.2 million community fund for torture and castration during the 1950s anti-colonial rebellion. This addressed specific atrocities but excluded broader colonial claims, illustrating a micro-reparations approach to limit liability. Germany to Namibia, 2021. Acknowledging the 1904 to 1908 Herero and Nama genocide, Germany committed €1.1 billion, $1.35 billion over 30 years in development aid for land reform and infrastructure. Critiqued for non-consultation with affected communities and framing aid as reparations, it nonetheless marks a rare colonial genocide acknowledgement, driven by Namibia's post-independence historical reconciliation. United States to Japanese Americans, 1988. The Civil Liberties Act provided $20,000 per internee to 82,000 survivors of World War II camps, plus a formal apology, totaling $1.6 billion. This domestic redress for racial injustice sets a precedent for state accountability without external pressure. CARICOM's regional push. Since 2013, Caribbean nations like Barbados and Jamaica have demanded reparations from Britain, France, and the Netherlands for slavery and genocide, estimating trillions in lost labor value. While no payments have materialized, apologies, e.g., Dutch King Willem-Alexander in 2023, and commissions signal momentum.
These cases underscore reparations' dual role: restorative justice and political stabilization. However, colonial claims face steeper hurdles than wartime or domestic ones, as former powers cite intertemporal law, wrongs predating modern human rights norms, and lack of precedent. Germany's Holocaust model, by contrast, exemplifies comprehensive, enduring redress. The Israeli paradigm, Holocaust reparations from Germany. Israel's reparations from Germany represent the most extensive and sustained program for historical wrongs, totaling over €90 billion, $100 billion, since 1952, with annual payments continuing into 2025. This framework, born of the 1952 Luxembourg Agreements, arose from immediate post-World War II advocacy. In 1945, Chaim Weizmann demanded indemnification from Allied powers, US, USSR, UK, France, for the Holocausts. Unprecedented devastation, estimating $1.5 billion for Israel alone. Negotiations led by Israel's Moshe Sharett and the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany Claims Conference culminated in West Germany's commitment of $3,845,000,000 in 1952 to Israel, paid in goods over 14 years, 1953 to 1966, plus $450 million to the Claims Conference for individual victims. Controversial in Israel, Menachem Begin decried it as blood money. The agreement fueled 12 to 14% of Israel's imports, aiding state building. Germany's motivations blended moral atonement, Chancellor Konrad Adenauer's 1951 Bundestag apology, with geopolitical strategy, reintegration into the Western Alliance amid Cold War tensions. Payments expanded post-reunification. In 1988, $125 million enabled lifelong $290 monthly pensions. By 2005, €63 billion had been dispersed to individuals. To this day, Germany provides annual compensation, negotiated yearly with the Claims Conference. For 2024, €1.4 billion, $1.5 billion, supported 280,000 global survivors, including $535 million in direct payments, pensions, and €1,250 one-time hardship grants, and €890 million for home care. In 2025, projections indicate similar scale, 1.3 billion euro total, with hardship payments rising to 1,300 euros per survivor, impacting 128,000 plus 35 million euros for Holocaust education and 25 million euros in solidarity aid to Israeli survivors post-October 7, 2023, attacks, 220 euros, one-time P, PVR, one-time P billionaire, one-time PO, one-time P, few Israeli survivors, one-time P, viewers, one-time P, one-time Fiors Franzimais, one-time P, Wishuros, one-time P. Survivors, one-time fee. These are dispersed via the Claims Conference, with Israel receiving direct state-to-state transfers for survivor services. Primarily from Germany, the perpetrator, supplementary funds have come from other nations and entities: France, rail deportations, Switzerland, Nazi-looted bank assets, 1998, 2002, and Austria via bilateral accords. However, Germany's 80+ billion euros share dominates, underscoring unilateral responsibility. Analytically, this model's success stems from 1. Unified advocacy claims conference's global coalition, 2. Legal framing under emerging human rights norms, 3. Economic leverage. Israel's nascent state needed capital, and 4. Perpetual negotiation, adapting to survivor aging, e.g. 2020 to 2023 COVID supplements. It contrasts sharply with colonial cases, where diffuse victimhood and temporal distance dilute urgency.
Barriers to reparations, lessons for Colombia. Spain's refusal mirrors European trends. Belgium's 2023 Congo Commission debates but defers payments. Portugal rejects slavery claims despite trafficking 6 million Africans. Legal obstacles include non-retroactivity, colonial acts pre-1948 Genocide Convention, and sovereign immunity, though ongoing effects, e.g., UN CERD obligations, provide footholds. Politically, Spain's right wing invokes heritage pride. Economically, 5.5 billion euros bilateral trade incentivizes silence. Yet, Israel's model demonstrates that sustained pressure can yield perpetual commitments, suggesting Colombia's internal conflicts, e.g., 2016 peace accord, need not preclude external claims. Recommendations: charting Colombia's path to reparations. To claim compensation from Spain, Colombia must adopt a multifaceted strategy, emulating Israel's unified advocacy while leveraging Latin American solidarity. Establish a national reparations commission, modeled on Barbados' 2012 task force. Convene indigenous, Afro-Colombian, and civil society representatives to quantify harms, e.g., euro trillions in extracted wealth, and propose modalities. Finance. Vice President Francia Marquez's 2025 UN advocacy provides momentum. Integrate with the 2021 Truth Commission for internal-external synergy. Multilateral diplomacy via CELAC, UN, rally Latin American states through the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, for joint demands, echoing CARICOM. Petition the UN Decolonization Committee for a global reparations fund, citing Pope Francis's 2022 colonial apologies as soft power leverage. Legal and cultural advocacy, file ICJ advisory opinions on colonial restitution, invoking the Chagos Islands precedent, 2021 ICJ ruling on UK. Mauritius. Escalate Quimbaya treasure claims via UNESCO, pressuring Spain's EU peers. Domestically, amend curricula to highlight colonial economics, fostering public support. Economic leverage and phased demands. Tie trade negotiations, e.g., EU-CESCAS, Colombia agreements, to reparations discussions. Proposing reparative aid, like Germany's Namibia model, Euro 500 million annually for indigenous land reform. Start with symbolic gestures, apology, to build toward material commitments, avoiding Israel's early controversies. Global coalition building, partner with reparations networks, e.g., UN's Aquium Rapporteur, and private actors, Spanish firms profiting from colonial resources. Track progress via annual reports, ensuring transparency.
Implementation requires political resolve from President Gustavo Petro's administration, but success could redistribute euro billions, healing fractures and modeling justice for the global south. Conclusion. Spain's unatoned wrongs in Colombia exemplify colonialism's enduring shadow, yet Israel